We are live. It is showtime. In a moment, in a very short moment, I will be bringing my brother, incredible subdeacon, in. We're going to be talking about the bodily, the Dormition, and the bodily Assumption of Holy Mary. It's going to be a very, very special show. In fact, let me mute myself. I see that I'm live now. Okay. But before we do that, let me hit the intro, and then I am going to bring my dear brother in. Everybody's got to excuse me. There we go. Otherwise, the intro is not going to look so good. Here we go. Here's go with the intro. And I am joined by my dear brother, Subdeacon Daniel. We're going to have a blast. We're going to be talking about the Dormition, the bodily Assumption of Mary, all the while looking at a video, a video done by a certain Protestant scholar, which we don't think was fair towards apostolic Christianity. And I think that's the most important thing, the fact that I'm here joined by my brother. We're so united on this incredibly wonderful topic. But before we even dive in, brother, I want to ask you how you been, my friend?
I'm good, William. Blessed Feast of the Assumption to you.
Blessed feast, brother. It's incredible. Have you gone to Mass yet? Have you gone yet?
Yeah,
I'm so jealous.
Was yesterday. Yeah,
that's right. It was yesterday. That's right. Yeah, incredible. Just really, honestly, what a magnificent festival, isn't it?
It's wonderful. It's I would say very major in our tradition. Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very significant. It is one thing that I like to point out is that when it comes to Mariology, we are so strongly united, this being a very important teaching. And of course, within the Syriac tradition, you all call it the Dormition, the Feast of the Dormition, right? But right in there with it is the belief that after Mary's holy falling asleep, she was bodily assumed into heaven. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Actually, we in Arabic we call it the Assumption.
Oh wow!
We call it the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. I've even if people are saying Dormition, they're always saying Dormition and Assumption together.
Right.
I rarely, if ever, hear people just say Dormition on its own.
Yeah, I agree with you, which is why I think it's a bit unfortunate that we have certain Protestants that will say, well, that they try to draw a difference between the Catholic way of celebrating it and the way perhaps any other apostolic church would celebrate it. Now, we will be looking at a number of areas, and I've got timestamps for everything. I will show video as the show does progress, but sometimes I won't. Like 4 minutes in, I don't need to show video for this statement that Dr. Ortlund does make that I think, for me, I understand where he's coming from, but to me, it is a bit of in my opinion, not really having a firmly rooted understanding of the apostolic churches today. In particular, we're talking about the Oriental Orthodoxy. Gavin says that he never heard of the bodily Assumption of Mary. He didn't hear of the Dormition or the bodily Assumption. 4 minutes in, on Cameron Battusi's channel, he says that until he studied Catholicism. Now, let me ask you, Subdeacon, very clearly, the belief of this does not hinge or rely upon any definition that any pope made in 1950, does it?
Not at all.
Not at all. And it's firm. Let me ask you this. Is this firmly rooted in the life of your faith?
Absolutely. It's on the calendar every year. It's there's a very particular rites we do for the Liturgy of the Assumption that is in all of Oriental Orthodoxy, not just the Syriac Orthodox Church. It's not something that, like you said, the Pope making that declaration in the 50s, we were unaware or didn't even consider what the Pope, like we've been doing it forever, you know?
Yeah.
Like we have our own rights, like from our own tradition for that particular feast, from what saints have delivered to us, you know. And I think even can't remember who the scholar was. Was it Schumacher or another one who said um, some very early sources for um, explicit celebration of the Assumption in the Syriac tradition are actually non-Chalcedonian. So it was already after the schism, you know?
Yeah, so that I want to emphasize, because yesterday, what I do was usually every other weekend I give Mariology courses. I give it to a closed group of a very, very incredible Patreon subscribers. And yesterday I was given a Mariology. We concluded with the Assumption of Mary, and I brought that point up. I said, you want to walk up to a Syriac Orthodox and you want to tell them that they believe in this because of the Pope? Really? Yeah, that's really. But to really get to the nitty gritty, brother, in my opinion, it's a bit disrespectful to not understand how firmly built into the faith of the apostolic churches that this really is.
Yeah, William, these for the, like, obviously there are many exceptions, I know, but for the most part, a lot of, like, the ignorance we see among some Western Christians is that they do not even consider, or it doesn't occur to them, the existence of Oriental Orthodoxy or even Assyrian Church of the East, for that matter. You know.
Yeah, it really doesn't, and that really isn't the most unfortunate thing. But that other point that I think is so important, and it's one that I remember talking to our mutual friend, the magnificent Dr. Brock, where I remember talking with him about the belief in the bodily assumption, that even Saint Jacob believes in the bodily assumption of Mary. And I remember asking Dr. Brock and saying, from everything I have read in Saint Jacob, it seems to be very in line with anything a Catholic could pick up Saint Jacob and have no problem with what he says. And indeed, a Catholic should pick up Saint Jacob and should read him. Very rich theological prose, magnificent Mariology. It doesn't get better than St. Jacob and St. Ephraim when it comes to Mary. Isn't that correct, brother?
Absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, William, I think the Roman Catholic Church has even canonized Jacob recently.
That is correct. He is a saint. I wish I remembered his feast day off the top of my head. I believe in January. I might be wrong. I could be wrong, but he is definitely a feast. He is on our calendar.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And like you said, in the homilies on the Mother of God, translated by Dr. Brock, published by St. Vladimir Press, there is a very strong implication that Jacob is referring to the Assumption of Mary.
Yeah.
Now, I think the critics would say it's not explicit enough, but that's only if they take it in a vacuum and separate it from the rest of the Syriac tradition from where this is coming, before and after it. Clearly, when Jacob is using these images of physical things being worn by her and her presence in heaven when she gets there, I mean, and in the context of you're familiar with Rabula of Edessa and his corpus, and then the tradition surrounding that leading up to Jacob, and then Severus and all that stuff that happens after. It's all part of that narrative. So I'm not sure why people, they really try hard to and go out of their way in order to not let this be true. It goes back to the show we did, remember, before, me and you, about Mary's other kids, supposed other kids. And it's like they go out of their way for these just argumentative points. They just want to be contrarian about something. There's no need to dispute that.
Yeah, there really is no need to that. That is a very good point. I have read St. Jacob in depth, and I agree. Everything to me is indicative of the belief in her being bodily assumed into heaven. I think that's very clear. Another magnificent, let me see if I can pull it up. This to me, and by the way, this translation I have shared with Subdeacon already. This translation provided courtesy of our dear friend, Dr. Brock. Let me go ahead and share it and we can read. These are the magnificent words of Ephraim. Let me see. hopefully, let me know. Are you able to see that, brother?
Yeah, I can see it.
Wonderful. Okay, I hope that is live also on the. Let me pull up the. Always helps having the stream open. And everybody that's tuning in, let us know what you think of the stream in the comments. I know we're doing it early, which is great. That way, people will be able to check this out in the evening. Here it is. It is open nicely. Let me go ahead and read it. Ephraim is very clearly talking about the end of Mary's life. This is confirmed to us by the great Father Juniper Carroll, Catholic scholar, and the great Dr. Brock, who provided this for me, says, I am about to enter into his living paradise, and in the place in which Eve succumbed, I shall glorify him. For of all created women, he was most pleased with me, and he willed that I should be mother to him, and it pleased him that he should be a child to me. Bethlehem thanks you that she was found worthy to give birth to you. To a great height. Okay, so let me focus on this point. Mary's about to enter into paradise, the end of her earthly life. How does she enter into paradise? To a great height, he lifted me with my saints so that I might glorify him. Where? In the broad and vast heaven, full of his glory. I don't think it can get clearer, can it, brother?
No, not at all. And there's a lot of I don't think people have thought this through, William. No. He's living in her womb for 9 months. God lived in her womb. He's gonna let it decay. It's just illogical.
Illogical, brother. It really is. And here's the other point that and later on as the show goes on, we will emphasize just how ridiculous it really is. It needs to be put away. This terrible argument that the belief in the Assumption of Mary is from Gnostic documents. Are you kidding me? Great. I mean, I want to emphasize, because Subdeacon and myself, we love talking about Mary, but we also love talking about the Trinity and Christology. Are you going to tell me that magnificent fathers like Ephraim, St. Ephraim, St. Jacob, and others that believed in the Assumption, believed in it because of Gnosticism with their incredible Trinitarian theology? Brother, it is ludicrous, isn't it?
Unbelievable. You can even trace the lineage of the teaching of Saint Ephraim. Like, everyone knows his teacher was Saint Jacob of Nisibis. Saint Jacob of Nisibis was present at the Council of Nicaea and affirmed to that council. And you can go back to see the lineage of all the apostolic tradition from the beginning of the churches of Edessa and Nisibis, going all the way from the twin of Saint Thomas, Saint Edde, brought it all the way through. Gnostics, what do Gnostics have to do with what we receive?
Yeah, it truly is unfortunate. You've got the great scholars like Shoemaker. By the way, what is Shoemaker? Is he Eastern Orthodox? I don't know what he is. He's not Catholic. I know that.
I thought he was Anglican, but I could.
Okay, he might be Anglican then. I know he's not Catholic. So, and I emphasize that because he is a scholar, and even Daly, who is Catholic, is a very fair scholar. Both of them will tell you that the belief in the Assumption does not have its origins in Gnosticism. But I want to emphasize that because I don't want people to then say, well, these are scholars, they're Catholic, so of course they're going to say that. Shoemaker, I can tell you right now, is not a Catholic. I'm not sure what he is, but I know he's not Catholic. Daly is Catholic, but he's very fair with the information. In fact, there's certain things that I have disagreed with Daly about. We've talked in private about, but not when it comes to Mariology. But I'd be interested. Perhaps he is Anglican.
Brock also not a Catholic. And
Brock as well. Yes, that's true.
And I don't know how to pronounce this one, but it's because he's very important in the scholarship. But Katouche or something.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce. You're talking about Dr. Is it Dr. Catherine? Or no, not that one.
No, it's Kateus.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that one. I've also heard of Dr. Catherine. Also would confirm the very same thing. So we've got so many scholars in the field. Neither of them are going to argue that it's Gnostic in origin.
For sure. Absolutely.
And I really think that is the important point. The claim that this be Gnostic in origin, I find it really, really unfortunate, brother. Here's another one. Now we will play video. Let me put a video up. This I hear it often from Gavin Ortlund, and he's been saying it for you know what? It is not going to let me play it. Unfortunately, I don't know why. It says I guess because the video clip is too long. That's fine, no big deal. Anyway, the video clip, we'll go over what he says. He makes a comment, and I wrote it down. He says that when it comes to Protestantism and Catholicism, of course, in the very same vein, he says that Protestants and Catholics are moving further away from one another when it comes to Mariology. Now, I want to be very clear, brother. I can agree with him that when it comes to the topic of Saint Mary, Protestants and Catholics and Oriental Orthodox, even Eastern Orthodox, are moving further away from Protestantism. But that's because Protestants move further away from the Apostolic faith. Isn't that correct, brother?
Absolutely. As you know better than I do, William, in the early Protestant movement, Luther, Calvin, and these guys, they had, compared to Protestants today, very high Mariology.
Very.
Yeah,
they really did. In fact, interestingly enough, and I'm trying to get my notes out, you have got multiple reformers. Jan Hus, who is very frequently, and in fact, I will share my screen for the audience to check this out. This is interesting. There are more. It's more than just Jan Hus. In fact, let me pull this up. This will be something interesting for the audience, and maybe they are not aware of this because it is very relevant to today. Let me share my screen. And I think you're going to get a kick out of this as well, brother. So here we go. Okay, let's check this out. Here we go. So, Jan Hus, by the way, who is writing in the 1300s very frequently, Hus is considered one of the great forerunners of the Reformation. You've got what is called a triple whammy here. Number one, you got Hus celebrating the Feast of the Assumption of Mary. Number two, you have him utilizing a deuterocanonical reading, a book that is lacking from Protestant Bibles, to confirm apostolic teaching. Number three, you have him confirming the belief in the Dormition and the bodily Assumption of Mary when he gets it from Sirach 24. And in all these I sought rest, and I shall abide in the inheritance of the Lord. So he believed this to be applicable to Holy Mary. This is an early, what is called a forerunner of the Reformation. Brother, isn't it incredible how not only is our Protestant Bibles smaller than the Bibles or what apostolic Christians would be considered scriptural, but this figure who is considered a great forerunner of the Reformation believes in the Assumption. That's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, and I, for any Protestant watching, I want to like throw this out there too, because especially like you have like the conservative Protestants and whatever, but the Protestant movement in and of itself is liberal. It's a liberal movement to break away from the church, private interpretation, etc.
Yep.
So naturally, this distance is going to keep going, because once you push the line, where does it stop? It just keeps going. And if you notice, William, a lot of the anti-Mary Protestants happen to be women.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's almost like Mary threatens them. And it all goes back to this liberalism eventually getting to atheism and feminism and all that stuff. Because after the Protestant Reformation, what happens is the Enlightenment era, which is terrible. This is the worst era in terms of faith. Yeah. So, and it's ironic because Protestants make themselves out to be the conservatives, etc., but actually they are the liberal.
Really, really good point there. It really is, at its heart, a liberal movement. And I take issue with the statements that the particular statement said, well, it's unfortunate because in ecumenical dialogue, look, in ecumenical dialogue, if you ever have to sacrifice what is apostolic in order for an ecumenical dialogue to work, you're doing it the wrong way. The apostolic churches should not be compromising on this teaching. And for Gavin Ortlund to, and by the way, I want to be very clear to the audience. I don't want people to think that Gavin is the only person we're focusing on. Gavin's, for some reason, this video he's done is popular on this point. There's nothing in it compelling, nothing in it where an apostolic Christian should say, wow, we're worried. There's nothing compelling there. We've heard these before. We've heard the arguments, and the argument that, well, there's a moving away. We can agree. You look at the reformers, they believed in the perpetual virginity of Mary. Many of them believed in the bodily assumption of Mary. So if there is a moving away, it's because Protestantism continues to mutate and continues to abandon the apostolic values. Isn't that right, brother?
Yes, for sure. And thank you, William, because I think you did an episode a while ago also. And then I think the counter was like, oh, well, the Syriac Orthodox, they're Monophysites. And then you said, actually, Christologically Orthodox. Thank you for having our back.
Brother, without a doubt. And to me, it is a very shocking thing that the Syriacs get swept aside because they really do not understand your faith. You all perplex them. So they'll hear figures like Jacob, Jacob, who cares about him? The guy's a heretic. No, he's not a heretic. And that problem, look, I want to give another shout out. Every time I can, I like to give a shout out to Gorgeous Pressure. I think that's the way you pronounce it. Yeah. Our dear friend, Sebastian Brock, writes for them. They're a little small Syriac Orthodox company, but they're publishing gigantically, incredibly mega great theological works. Go and support them. They've got great stuff there. And we have to emphasize there is a confusion, I guess, within Protestantism where they just don't know how to deal with a Syriac Orthodoxy. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I'm telling you, doesn't occur to them. They don't consider us at all. They don't even think about Syriac or Aramaic. Everything is Greek and period, and obviously there's nothing wrong with Greek, but Syriac is an essential part of early patristics, of early Christian tradition. You have three major traditions: Latin, Greek, and Syriac. Yeah. So you can't discount one of the three. Each one is maybe emphasizes one thing, like the Latins with the like law, and the Greeks with philosophy, the Syriacs with poetry and this type of language regarding Mary, and it's you're not going to find, and I think he's like Gavin or whoever it is coming at it, and all of these Westerners, they come at the Syriac tradition hoping to see either, well, are they affirming there is a feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary just explicitly laid out like that, or is it going to be something negating? But that's not how the Syriac tradition works. No, it's not arguing with Protestants because Protestants didn't exist. It's talking from itself to its people in the way that its people talk. So it doesn't need to say about this kind of explicit thing because all the readers of Jacob are clearly from the same cloth, understanding what Jacob means.
Yep. Yeah, without a doubt, you don't have anybody standing up against what these early church fathers are saying. So very, very clearly this, well, and you brought up that point, I think really doesn't get emphasized enough, that Latin, Greek, and Syriac believe this. That's incredible. That is a mark of Catholicity, of apostolicity. The fact that the universal church believed this, and today you have people within Protestantism scratching their head, and this is just really perplexing to me because at the 11-minute mark in the video, Gavin Ortlund, and I wrote it down, point blank says, and we touched upon this earlier, but how this to me is just so ridiculous. He says belief in the assumption has to do with papal authority. I mean, that's got to be really something. It's got to be news to you, right, brother?
I mean, maybe you know someone. From what I know, the earliest sources I can find for the Assumption with the Virgin Mary are actually Syriac sources in the East. Nothing to do with Italy. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's a bit of a smack to the face, that claim, and a bit of a really not understanding the source material. I mean, look, people will ask and they'll say, okay, well, what is the earliest material? You look at Brock, you look at Daly, you look at Shoemaker, and they're going to tell you, okay, this is very early on. But then, and rightly so, a Protestant will say, okay, well, you've got books and you've got stories that show the community believed it. But what about early church fathers? We just showed you Ephraim the Syrian. And Ephraim is a Syriac father. So you've got an incredible testimony in the Syriac church. And to claim that it comes from papal authority is really nonsensical.
And not, it's nonsensical in everything you said. Plus, in Roman Catholicism, I think the Dormition is not official. Just the Assumption is. Whereas in the East, the Dormition is also official.
Yep.
So like if it's a papal thing, well, why are we emphasizing both while the Romans are only saying the Assumption part? Like, it doesn't make sense because it's not identical, you know?
Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense. And another point that he does, he will mention, he will bring up how at Ephesus, the Council of Ephesus, it was a primarily Christological council. Nobody argues against that. But everything we say about Mary points to Christ. You talk about the Dormition, the bodily Assumption of Mary, and that points to the amazing things our Lord did for his mother, how he created such a magnificent creature. All of this, you can say, points to having a proper Christology. And I'd like to add another thing. I am baffled how you will have Protestants hearkening. Some hearken to Chalcedon, some hearken to Ephesus. How are you going to bring up Ephesus? Do you believe even a fraction of what they believed at Ephesus? They don't. I mean, would you have believed what St. Cyril believed about Mary, about the Eucharist? And if you don't, why are you pointing to Ephesus as if anyone there at the council would have been a friend to your cause? Brother, it really does baffle me.
Yeah, Ephesus. So they replaced when Ephesus became Christian, they replaced Aphrodite with Virgin Mary. They stopped worshiping Aphrodite. They began venerating Virgin Mary, and the city was dedicated to Virgin Mary as a sign of repentance for their paganism. So that the reason why the council was held at Ephesus is because of the high Mariology of Ephesus. That's the whole point. That had already existed before that. And like you said, William, I would like to meet a Protestant who is okay with the title Mother of God, just like Ephesus. Yep. But I want to see why he would be okay with it, because I bet you anything, William, even if he's okay with it nominally, his Christology would still be heretical.
It would be terrible. And I bring that up very often. And I think, look, brother, I've heard it many times how today Protestants are jumping on the bandwagon of saying, wait, look, we got no problem calling Mary the Mother of God. The reason they're doing that now is they realize the massive amount of church fathers against their cause. So they'll say, we've got no problem with that. We hold that. We affirm that. The problem is that they really don't know what they're saying. They don't know what. I would be shocked if any of them have read what St. Cyril had to say. I'd be blown away if they did. And I'd be willing to bet that they have not.
And they would disagree with him on so many points.
Yep.
Just to correct myself earlier, I said Aphrodite. I meant Artemis. My bad.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, if they read Cyril Christologically, his belief in the priesthood, sacraments, everything, now they want to use Ephesus as if it supports them. In what way?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Especially not only Cyril, the great Saint Cyril, any of the other key figures at Ephesus, any of those key Orthodox figures, they're not going to agree with what they believe. And I frequently also mention that if you look at the letter, Saint Cyril, letters, more than one, of Saint Cyril's Mariology, very often when Cyril talks about Holy Mary as being Theotokos, being Mother of God, he also includes much more flowery and beautiful language about Mary. Do you accept only that one little piece and you reject all the other? Look, I got to be honest.
Virgin. He calls her ever virgin.
Ever virgin, yes.
Yeah.
Their belief is a perversion. He believes she was ever virgin. They don't hold to that.
Exactly.
They don't. So the Council of Ephesus is no friend to the cause of Protestant. I am very, very often baffled how they will hearken to any of these ancient councils, but I know why they do it. They modern day Protestantism, because Calvin, look, at least Calvin and the boys had no problem admitting that they were out of touch with the early church and they just didn't care. Modern Protestants are horrified because they're losing people by the tons to the apostolic churches. They're losing people, they're bleeding members. So they're trying to make it seem like the early church was proto-Protestant. I know they're not going to admit it, but that's what they're trying to do. Yeah. And the idea that the early church, which celebrated the Holy Eucharist, believed in veneration of Mary, prayed for the dead, and had a proper Christology, the idea that it would be even remotely Protestant is mind-baffling, isn't it, brother?
Bro, they it's really funny, because if you read from the Apostolic Fathers, like Clement of Rome, Ignatius of Antioch, and these guys, so they'll get to the part, let's say, where Clement of Rome then talks about apostolic succession. I think it's chapter 64 or 66. Right. And then they kind of are like, let's read this super fast so we can get to the next chapter. And then Ignatius of Antioch, okay, they misinterpret all the Eucharist stuff. Okay, then what about the part where he says the bishop is like Jesus Christ and everyone has to be united with him, like the Catholic Church, and that language.
Yeah.
Okay, where do Protestants obey bishops like they obey Jesus Christ? Unless the Protestants, if they're honest, they'll tell you that's blasphemous.
Right.
So then Clement of Rome, Ignatius of Antioch, that's blasphemy for Protestants. So early Christianity is a different religion. Protestantism is something else. Yeah. Something
very, very different. And the other thing that, and you brought it up, and I think it's very important, is that scholarship is also no friend to the Protestant cause. The one thing that I'm a bit baffled by is that you will, and I'm glad I have the clip, I'll play it in just a moment. You will hear often how Shoemaker is brought up over and over. But what is not read from Shoemaker is, and I'm gonna let me get the screenshot that I got. What is not read from Shoemaker is so significant, because when we do read it, it does not work for the cause of Protestantism. And let me open it wide, because we're going to read what Shoemaker has to say. Okay, let me share my screen. And right here. Okay. Shoemaker notes, and by the way, I would like to add, Shoemaker has, even in more recent works, dialed it earlier. He said, we may conclude with some degree of certainty that the earliest palm traditions were already in existence sometime before 400 CE, and very probably earlier, perhaps even as early as the 2nd century. I want to emphasize, and later in not only in that work, but in Shoemaker's book on the Dormition and Assumption of Mary, he will tell you it is categorically false that these have their origin in Gnosticism. They do not. He says over and over, they are orthodox. So that is a grand problem for Protestantism.
Bro, why would, like, these guys, I think they make claims, they don't think about what they're saying, because the Gnostics were against anything physical.
Yep.
So why would the Gnostics be saying Mary was physically taken into heaven? It doesn't make sense.
It does not make any sense at all. If they were against the physical, you have evidence of multiple believing in a phantom kind of theology.
Yeah.
They're not going to emphasize the bodily resurrection of Mary. It would not make any sense at all.
Exactly.
Now, there is one other, and I'll share my screen again in a moment. This is a claim that I hear get brought up often, and it's an unfortunate one. First off, I will note that Tertullian is not a church father. As far as I'm aware, I don't think in any of the apostolic faiths. He died a heretic, died outside of the fold of the church. In my opinion, I've had people tell me otherwise. I don't think there's any good evidence to believe he returned to the faith. And people wonder, he had a terrible Mariology, unfortunately, towards the end, and his Christology was also quite skewed towards the end there. So he's not on the calendar for you all, right? There's no way.
Nope.
He's not on ours either. St. Jerome was very clear that he did not die within the fold of the church. People will say, well, Jerome includes him in great church writers. Yeah, great church writer. But Jerome, what does Jerome tell you when he's arguing against Helvidius? Tertullian was not part of the church, he tells you. You could have been a great ecclesiastical writer. Doesn't mean you made the cut to sainthood. But we hear Tertullian get brought up by Gavin Ortlund. He says, well, Tertullian has a list of people who were bodily assumed into heaven, and Tertullian never talks about Mary. As if the argument from silence is the conquering one of the day. But the problem with that as well, brother, is Gavin Ortlund. I've talked with Gavin Ortlund. We talk every now and then. We had a little bit of a sour relationship not long back, and thank the good Lord we put that aside. I've told Gavin I am willing to debate you whenever you want to debate, and there might be a show we do together sometime in the future. So I would like for the audience to know, Gavin is very well aware of my work. I mentioned those comments so that people can be aware. He's aware of my work. He's aware that I have already rebutted these points, but he continues to repeat them. And the argument of Tertullian is one that really just, unfortunately, keeps getting brought up, and it really needs to get put to rest, because what Tertullian is doing, he's saying, all nations have to ascend to the mount of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, who demands of his saints in martyrdom that death which he exacted even of his Christ. No one will ascribe to magic such influence as shall exempt from death. And then he goes on to say, Enoch no doubt was translated, and so was Elijah. Nor did they experience death. It was postponed. They are reserved for the suffering of death. Now, here's what you don't hear from Gavin Ortlund. Gavin Ortlund will tell you, well, Tertullian, he's got a list of people that are bodily assumed. Where's Mary if Mary's most bodily assumed? The problem is that context usually destroys Protestantism, because Tertullian is talking about those that are martyred. Says everyone has to die. Tertullian believed in the tradition, and it was nowhere unanimous. He believed Enoch and Elijah would have to return to be martyred. So he's talking about the fact that Enoch and Elijah still have to return, and he believes they're going to return and be martyred. He's talking about those that are martyred. It's not an exhaustive list, and even if it would have been an exhaustive list, an argument from silence is hardly any worthy argument.
Plus, William, he's not talking about assumptions. He's talking about those who haven't died. So
exactly,
Mary died. So she's
and
not,
Mary was martyred.
Yeah,
yep.
That's it. Mary died and rose. So then if Elijah or Enoch had died, they wouldn't be on the list either. They just didn't die.
Very, very good point that you bring up there. Very, very good point. And I think it is a point that doesn't get emphasized enough. I don't think any kind of argument from silence does work, but I think that the kind of desperation to skew the information, to me, is quite problematic. I find that to be problematic, brother. In a bit, we'll look at Epiphanius, but the Reverend Dr. Daly, who, by the way, has written a great book on the Dormition, very, very good book. He does get brought up as kind of like a friend to the cause of Protestantism on the Assumption of Mary, because Daly says, I don't know if Daly says 4th or 5th century. I think maybe let's go with the later one, 5th. That Protestants will quote him saying that it isn't until the 5th century that there is a fixed narrative on the Assumption of Mary. The problem with that is that they're ripping Daly out of context. Because on the one hand, Daly believes this to be apostolic in origin, but he says there are different stories in different regions of the world. It isn't until later that it becomes one uniform story. But Daly doesn't say this originated in the 4th or 5th century. That's a bit of sleight of hand of ripping things out of. That's a bit, in my opinion, let me be honest, brother, it's a bit dishonest.
100%. And we don't hear them making the same argument for Easter. There was the Quattro Decimans, however you pronounce it, and all these other groups doing it at different times and for different reasons, and then eventually became a uniform thing. You don't hear them saying things like that about it. Even the Nicene Creed, there were different creeds everywhere, and then it became uniform. But for this, they want to make it a thing. Again, it's weird because it's like, what does Mary being assumed into heaven, how does it take anything away from them? And they just want to be against it seemingly for no reason.
In my opinion, it really is a prejudice to really, in any way possible, denigrate Mary, because if Mary was bodily assumed into heaven, what a great creature this woman must be. And it must validate the fact that as apostolic Christians, we venerate her. And they try to eliminate any kind of veneration to Mary. And thus, that is why they even deny her as perpetual virgin. They need to remove any kind of special tag that Mary may have. And as they do that, brother, they move further away from the apostolic faith. Let me just paint this picture. Do you think any of those gentlemen, those amazing saints, forgive me for saying gentlemen, those great saints at Ephesus, do you think any of them would identify with any of these Protestant churches and their beliefs today?
Not at all, William. And it's really obvious what you're saying, that they do that, because they don't do it with Elijah, they don't do it with Enoch, they don't do it with John the Baptist. What is it? What's their problem with Mary? They have this weird reaction problem with her. I don't get it.
It really is. It is very odd. It is very unfortunate. To me, it just really just smack of just really trying to remove any kind of honor.
Yeah,
it does deserve, in their opinion. This other writing, and this has become a bit controversial as of late, because if you look at Father Juniper Carroll and many other older works, Father Ludwig Ott, they bring up Epiphanius, but they don't bring up what Epiphanius has to say about the bodily resurrection. Now, people will say, well, why was it ignored back then? Well, it may have been ignored back then by Father Juniper Carroll. Ever since he wrote, this is a while back, we have found more writings that give honor to Mary. We found a writing from Theotechnos Oblivias. Newer writings, newer translations come to the front, which are great. The fact of the matter is, Epiphanius is a popular figure because in his Panarion 78, he writes about Mary, and he says that nobody knows. Mary died. Is Mary still alive? What happened to Mary? And people tend to forget that in Panarion 79, Epiphanius comes to a conclusion as to what happened to Mary. Now, I don't know anyone else that has done videos on this. I've done classes on it. And I've received pushback from James White, Gavin Ortlund, and I have even been told that scholarship would not agree with me We're going to see what scholarship does say in just a moment. But before we do see what scholarship says, let's check out Epiphanius. And I would like for the audience, as we look at what Epiphanius has to say, you tell me what you think makes the most sense. Is Epiphanius drawing a parallel to where he is affirming the bodily assumption of Mary? And I think the conclusion will be, without a doubt. So this is Panarian 79. In fact, I did a whole show on it. Panarian 79. So what Epiphanius, as brother Subdeacon knows and everybody knows, he is obviously refuting the Collyridians who are worshiping Mary. We don't worship Mary. We don't offer the Eucharist to Mary. We don't worship her. We venerate her. And he eventually gets to the part where he says, like the bodies of the saints, however, Mary, she has been held in honor for her character and understanding. And if I should say anything more in her praise, she is like Elijah. This doesn't get any clearer. How is Mary like Elijah, who was virgin from his mother's womb, always remained so, and was taken up and has not seen death? She is like John, who leaned on the Lord's breast. By the way, there was a tradition of the Dormition of John, and that John was perpetual virgin. She is like Saint Thecla, and Mary is still more honored than she because of the providence vouchsafed her. I have looked at the Greek. I have talked with the Greek scholars. I have talked with Dr. Brock, the Reverend Dr. Koppes, the Reverend Dr. Daly, and I have read what Shoemaker says. How else is Mary like Elijah? If he draws a parallel, she is like Elijah, who was virgin from his mother's womb, always remained so, and was taken up and has not seen death. To me, it's very clear, brother. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that is. I think that's something for the Latins. They have an argument now with us about whether she died or not. But I don't know. I don't see where the Protestants have any room in this.
No, I don't either. By the way, there is a very good article. I have not delved deep into it, but even the Reverend Dr. Daly, though, by the way, yeah, he does make a very convincing argument. He'll say that those that believe in the immortal Mary, he'll say, and look, Catholics, I love you guys and gals who believe that if you believe Mary didn't die, okay, I love you, perfectly fine. But the Reverend Dr. Daly does make a very good point. He says, even in Epiphanius, you can extrapolate that he believes Mary probably did die because of the parallel he's drawing, saying she is like John. That's in reference to the tradition of John's Dormition. So my friends who believe in the immortal Mary, I believe she's immortal too in heaven. But I believe that it's very likely he believes she had a holy Dormition as well. But either way, the fact of the matter is he believes that she's bodily translated here. Very clear there. But the amount of pushback that I've gotten from taking that position has been a little bit shocking. I think that if people knew that there are scholars that also hold to this, such as, and by the way, I'd recommend the audience go look at the show I did with the Reverend Dr. Daly. He will confirm Epiphanius does believe in the bodily assumption here. But there's also something interesting. Somebody's going to say, well, Subdeacon and William, well, of course, the guy's a Catholic. Of course he's going to say that. And of course he is on your side in that regard. Give me somebody else. We'll give them somebody else as they want. This is Shoemaker, who nobody could argue is a Catholic. In his first account from the letter to Arabia, as Epiphanius excoriates the Collyridians' rituals, he turns suddenly to the question of the end of Mary's life, professing the strict agnosticism on this subject, for which he has become so famous in various modern studies on the Dormition and Assumption. Without making any transition to a new topic, he writes, the Holy Virgin may have died and been buried. Her Dormition, falling asleep, was with honor. Her death in purity, her crown in virginity. Or she may have been put to death, as the scripture says, and a sword shall pierce through her soul. Her fame is among the martyrs, and her body, by which light rose in the world, rests amid blessings. Or she remained alive, for God is not incapable of doing whatever he wills. No one knows her end. But it doesn't end there. He continues on how Epiphanius continues attacking the Collyridians. But notice how he also goes on. Epiphanius eventually comes to address the bread offerings of the Collyridians, which he attacks by comparing Mary with Elijah, John, and Thecla. In this way, he continues his apparent strategy of undermining this veneration of the Virgin through a broader attack against veneration of the saints. The main point here is that just as Elijah, John, and Thecla are not venerated using blasphemous ritual practices, there's no basis for the Collyridian veneration of Mary. They were actually worshiping her. And he goes onward to note that, look at this. Instead, here, Epiphanius' comparisons with Elijah and John focus on the miraculous manner in which each ended their life. Mary is like Elijah, he explains, in that he was a virgin from his mother's womb, remained so perpetually, and was assumed. Look at that. And has not seen death. Although this passage has been frequently overlooked in various studies of the Virgin's Dormition and Assumption, the last 2 points deserve particular emphasis. In contrast with the guarded agnosticism of the letter to Arabia, which previous scholarship has overwhelmingly taken evidence that Epiphanius knew of no tradition of the end of Mary's life, here he rather unambiguously proclaims that Mary, like Elijah, was assumed. I don't know what else needs to be done. If we've not only do we have the opinions of Subdeacon Daniel and myself, I think that's a clear reading. We have multiple scholars that believe this as well, including, by the way, even though he has not done it publicly, he has told me personally, Dr. Brock says it's a clear reading as well. You've got multiple scholars that see that. Brother, what do we do when scholarship also confirms this, but Protestants refuse to budge?
I think Protestants need to, because Protestantism is essentially worshiping in front of a mirror.
Yep.
So what Protestants need to do is they need to be honest with themselves. Stop forcing scripture and tradition to fit whatever it is that they believe. Instead, take what it's saying at face value and adapt your beliefs to it.
Yep.
You know, and yeah, the main issue, just like the first sin ever, is pride. It's humbling yourself to the holy tradition rather than to your own private interpretation.
And that really does. It really does come down to a private interpretation, because if we realize that this belief of Mary, the bodily assumption of Mary, is so strongly in the liturgical life of the apostolic churches, you're not going to find an Oriental Orthodox that will say, well, you know what, maybe I believe in it, maybe I don't believe in it. It is part of the faith.
No, yeah,
right. There we go. That is my question to you. Is it optional within Oriental Orthodoxy?
Absolutely not.
No.
How are you going to go to liturgy where they're doing the whole liturgy for the Assumption, the whole feast day, with the whole writing about the Assumption, and you're going to be like, yeah, I don't agree with this. What are you doing there? You know? What
are you doing there? Is the exact point. What would you be doing there? And it really does go to the point, to the heart of the issue, I think, is the fact that there really is no liturgy within Protestantism. And I know my Protestant friends will come back and say, well, what are you talking about? We have, but for my Anglican friends or Lutheran, they will maybe come back and say, well, we most definitely have liturgy. In my opinion, the heart of the liturgy, you're going to have a valid Eucharistic sacrifice, and they don't have. They do not have a valid Eucharist. As tough as it may sound, we're just being honest. If you are not part of the apostolic churches, you don't have a valid Eucharist. You do not have a valid priesthood. And I think really a lot of these attacks on Mary really are not patristic based, are they, brother?
No, they're not. I think they come from an evil place, even if the person maybe is sincere and maybe doesn't realize that. But just from, I think if someone thinks it through, they would think, why am I fighting against my own mother? Doesn't make sense.
Now, that is a great point there. I know it may not be something, or maybe it is something mentioned often within Oriental Orthodoxy. Perhaps it is. Is there a kind of theological opinion that it would be valid to say that Mary is the mother of the church? Is that orthodox within Oriental Orthodoxy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. It is. Okay, that's great. That I was not aware of, but that would fit very well within Catholicism as well. Yeah. Being able to call Mary the mother of the church.
She has many names that we give her. In the liturgy, you would hear it almost every week. We call her the mother of salvation. We call her the mother of light. I mean, you can't get through a Syriac Orthodox liturgy without hearing all these like long list of honorifics for the Virgin Mary,
which is beautiful. It really is beautiful. Now, within the Syriac Orthodox tradition, does the Book of Revelation get utilized much?
No, it doesn't. Us and the Assyrian Church of the East together, I think we are the least that use it.
Right.
We're aware of it. Like we can, like we have saints who did use it because they were
sure. Yes.
So, like Severus or others.
Yes.
But in the lectionary, it's not there. So. Right. So, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, William, I think Latins use Revelation 12.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep, that's correct.
Awesome.
Yeah, we utilize Revelation 12. And that's a particular thing. In fact, let me pull it up. I'd like to show you. I think Revelation 12 is now, within the Bible, very much keeping in line with the magnificent theology that you find in Ephraim. Very clearly, there are multiple layers to Scripture. And I think Revelation 12 is another area where there are multiple layers. On the one hand, you can look at this woman as being the church, as multiple fathers did, but multiple fathers took it as being the church and the woman being Mary. The reason being, this woman that appears in Revelation 12, historically, we read that this woman gives birth to a male child. Now, historically, the only person that gave birth to the Messiah is Mary. So historically, primarily, we can view Revelation 12 in a Mariological fashion. The reason I ask you about Mary as mother of the church is because you encounter verses 13 to 17. We're told from Protestants that this completely destroys any chance that this is Mariological, because we are told verse 17 is so damaging to Catholicism. Let's read verse 17. I'd like to get your thoughts on it, Subdeacon. And by the way, for the audience to know, Subdeacon doesn't know at all where I'm going here because we didn't talk about it before the show. But let me read it. It says, "And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring." A Protestant, Gavin Ortlund, and multiple others say, well, you got a big problem. Because if you believe it's Mary, it says Mary has other children. But that's not the way the early fathers had utilized Revelation, because not all of them did. Revelation was not utilized a whole lot. But the ones that read Revelation 12:17, viewing the Mariological aspect, they didn't interpret it that way. Rather, if you look at the very context, it says they went to make war with the rest of her offspring. Well, who are they? Who are the rest of the offspring? They're the ones who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. As we find patristically, this is presenting the woman as the mother of the church, not having actual children. What are your thoughts on that, brother?
Of course. Like, why would anybody understand it like that? Like, bro, these guys, they think that this was all kind of written in English in the council King James inspired, and then they fell into like it's ridiculous. We call her in Arabic al-Mu'mineen, means the mother of the believers. You know, she's all of our mom. Okay, so then when Jesus is at the cross and he tells John, "This is your mother," what does that mean? And he tells her, "This is your son."
Behold your mother, behold your son, behold your mother. It's very clear.
You want to know something crazy too, William? Like, even though the Syriac Orthodox and Assyrian Church of the East don't have revelation, yet if you compare their liturgies with the liturgy that's in the book of Revelation, I think chapter 4 or 5 through 8, something like that. There's that liturgy in heaven that's happening in Revelation. It's almost word for word the same.
Yeah.
Because it shows the commonality of the apostolic tradition despite not having the book, you know.
That really is incredible. And rightly so. You've got such beautiful imagery there. To me, even that's the number one thing. These fathers were not writing in King James English. They were not, and they most certainly were not Protestant. Yeah. You know, the church fathers were not Protestant at all. I think that these are. I'm going to agree with Gavin on one thing. Very strongly agree that Protestantism and Catholicism, and I'm going to toss in the Orthodox churches as well, are most definitely moving further away from each other when it comes to Mariology. And I've got to be very clear, brother. I don't see that changing anytime soon, and I don't see that
get worse.
It's going to get worse. Now, why is that so? Because Protestantism continues to want to look for a nice word. Continues to change.
Yeah,
it continues to go down. In my opinion, a dark path. It really amounts to darkness. I'm just being brutally honest. If you find yourself within Protestantism, the idea of not having our Lord present in the Eucharist, I cannot even imagine that, brother. I cannot even imagine that. The beauty we have within our apostolic faith, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And for our Protestant friends that maybe you're on the fence and you're thinking, well, you know what, this is a very tough thing to overcome. It should not be a tough thing to overcome. What would your message be, brother, to those that maybe are on the fence? Because I have seen some say, you know what, I'm a bit on the fence. I think at least you shouldn't be on the fence when it comes to the Assumption of Mary. There's incredible testimony and evidence for it.
Yeah, I like you said, William, without the Eucharist, what do we have? We have nothing.
Yeah.
And like without the sacraments, without the medicine that is available in the hospital, church, you know, confession, which is the washing of feet, like Jesus tells Peter, you're already clean, you just need to wash your feet, which is confession. Like all of these things, what do we have? So if you're a Protestant and you have none of this, well, what's the point of anything? Why even go on Sunday to anywhere? Why don't you just watch a sermon on TV or on YouTube? Yep. At least you agree with the guy. It doesn't have to be local. And so it's just this echo chamber that you live in, and you don't have to do anything. It's just information that you retain. Whereas in true apostolic Christianity that still exists today, there's a system set up by Christ on the apostles for the salvation of the world. This is the Ark of Noah, right? So this is to save us. And then the gates of Hades, or in Syriac it says the bars of Hades, will not prevail against the church. If you think about that verse, William, bars, gates is not really. It's for keeping people in. It's not it's not for going on the offense against the church. It's a defense of Hades. Wow. So the church is going to go in and grab the people out and bring them.
That's amazing.
So that is what the church function is. But for them, it's all about this informative. Wasn't there a heresy like this where you have to have knowledge? Gnosticism. How ironic.
Gnosis.
That's them.
Gnosis. A deep knowledge. And interestingly enough that you bring that up, funny how all of these denial of things that are very clearly scriptural and Mariological, such as the perpetual virginity of Mary. We've done shows how that is Arian in origin. It blew up within Arianism. And if people want to argue and say, well, even Tertullian denied it, well, Tertullian, when he denied it, was a Montanist. So either way, all of this at its very core, it has a very, look, if you have a poor and a low Mariology, you're going to have a poor and a low Christology. I'd be willing to bet anything. I'd be willing to put money on the table that your Christology is going to be deficient if you have a poor Mariology. And that is not worshiping or elevating Mary to the level of a goddess. That is recognizing the scriptures and what the early church fathers say. Isn't that correct? Have you seen that as well, brother? With a poor Mariology is a poor Christology.
100%. You can't separate the two things, and that was Cyril's main point. In argument. It wasn't about Mary proper. It was about who Mary bore, and then that relates to the title that's given to her.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, you have about 10, 15 minutes for some questions, brother?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome, let's do it. So we've got, let me look at the comments. We have got, where is it? Okay, we have, this is a good one. This is from Albert. According to the Oriental Orthodox understanding, where did Our Lady die or slept and was then assumed into heaven? Was it in Jerusalem or Ephesus?
It was in Jerusalem, I think we say. Trying to remember, was it? Yeah, I think it was in Jerusalem. And there was an entire liturgy presided over by St. Peter. All the apostles were there. And then afterwards, she had a holy Dormition, like you said, and was taken. St. Thomas, as usual, was late. So he was coming back from India for an intermission before he went back to get martyred there. So, and on his way, he sees her being assumed. So she kind of translates him to herself and gives him her girdle as proof that he witnessed her assumption. And then he goes back and shows the apostles, I saw her with my eyes. Again, him with he needs to touch and see and feel to believe the thing.
Typical.
So, so he has the girdle. The girdle till this day is in the church in Homs in Syria. And there is a historiographical record of that girdle being 2,000 years present in that community.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible historical record. I think it was you or somebody else that showed it to me, and I was just totally blown away because the one thing that I really emphasize to people here is the fact that magnificently, a lot of the relics that we have today, not all of them, but a lot of them have great historical record, and that one is a great historical record. That's just magnificent. Anthony would like to know, why is the Assumption central to the faith? I would say it is a liturgical life, and it's part of the liturgical life, and it is a teaching that all of the apostolic churches hold to. When you've got something like that, like the perpetual virginity of Mary, you have got a mark of apostolicity. That is something very, very important. How would you answer that, brother?
The same. So it's important for the Western Christians to kind of understand for apostolic Christianity, maybe there aren't these categories of this is essential, this is not. This is like, I believe in tongues. I don't believe in tongues. Like we don't have stuff like this. So for us, it's like a whole package. If we're accepting apostolic Christianity, we're accepting apostolic Christianity. I'm not going to accept, it's not a cafeteria. I'm not going to put some of this in.
That's the one thing that I'd like to pick your brain on, brother, that I don't quite, and maybe you can help me understand. I can't quite wrap my head around it. I have friends of mine that are evangelical, or even some that are Catholic, that will say, well, why do I have to believe in this? And why is it so central? I mean, if it's true and if it's apostolic, you can't just pick and choose.
Yeah, and really this humility is key. And I think it's such a hard step that for people who are not accustomed to themselves being the final authority on truth, what the apostles delivered to us, that we keep. It's not a matter of if I like it or not.
Yeah.
It's a matter of truth.
Yeah, very, very similar to the perpetual virginity of St. Mary. You're not going to find any early church father denying it. You're definitely not going to find any Syriac, any Latin, or any Greek, that deny Mary as perpetual virgin. That was that was a mark of orthodoxy in the early church. That's very, very important. Now we have Danny asking, this is for you, Subdeacon. First of all, blessings to you, William, and Subdeacon. Thank you. My question is, why are there different ways of expressing the Assumption and Dormition existing in the Western Eastern churches? I think that we did say earlier that first off, it's pretty much the very same thing. I don't know what he might be getting at there, brother. You have in mind?
Yeah, I think he's trying to say, why did some of the Latins not say she died, and why do we say?
There we go.
I'm not familiar too much with the Latin tradition. William, the guy on that. With the Syriacs, we didn't even know that there was the option that she didn't die. It's in this the what do they call them, the Lives of the Saints.
Yep.
I have the whole story that I had just explained on the previous question about her holy Dormition, etc., with St. Thomas and all that. So the Latins, I don't know, like their, how long they trace it back or whatever. So that's how I would answer the question.
Yeah, I would, and I know I tend to get a little bit of flack here. Usually, it's my my Latin brothers and sisters that I'll encounter a few of them that think that Mary didn't die. Okay, that's fine. But if you do read, and I recommend they read it right now online, if they read Munus Sanctissimus Deus from the Pope, where it dogmatically defined the bodily Assumption of Mary, I'd like for them to read the whole document, because the Pope does say that Mary died there. He believed he believed Mary died. But the dogmatic definition in and of itself is very clear. It wants to focus on the end of her earthly life. So that's the important thing there. I think that's probably the one thing that the Pope tried to really, really zero in on, that we need to focus and examine that. And that's the most important thing. So let me see. Thank you very much for that, Apostate. If anyone has any doubts that our beloved Theotokos isn't living, I strongly recommend watching William's interview with Jesse Romero. Jesse Romero is very clear. We would all agree that, and I want to emphasize, it's very important to say that even if we emphasize and believe that Mary had a holy dormition, a holy falling asleep, we believe that she is immortal in heaven. She is immortal and she is alive in heaven. And we emphasize that in everything that we say. So I am looking for any other questions. If I don't see any other, we will wrap it up. I do have to still get to Mass today. The brother is lucky enough to get to Mass yesterday. I bet it was a beautiful one, wasn't it, brother?
It was, William. I think once we become maybe a little bit more settled here in the West, we will start doing it on the days. It's gotcha. Like we're still first generation here in America, so we're kind of compacting things on Sundays and whatever. And it would have been nice to do it today because it's the actual day.
It is the actual day. Yeah, correct. How was the church? A good amount of people there?
Bro, it was so packed.
Glory to God.
We needed to bring in more seats from outside because the seats inside the church weren't enough, and people were still standing in the back everywhere.
Right, yeah. Now
the altar was full of deacons and subdeacons and readers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, incredible. Now we do have a question, and we've talked about it before, so we won't talk about it right now. We've done a whole show on how it's definitely permissible to talk about Mary being immaculate within the Syriac tradition. But here's a question that I will transform Frederick's question. I'll ask: within the Syriac tradition, is it possible to ever have imagined that Mary's body would have corrupted before Mary was taken body and soul into heaven?
No, because of who we always use the parallel of the chariot of fire.
Yeah.
And Mary and Jesus in her womb. So it's not something, because it was consecrated to him and holy, and he lived there. like in his, and people like to say in his humanity, or no, in both, in his divinity and humanity. It
Yep.
was not, yeah. So, and there's so many hymns like the uncontainable was contained in the womb, and Saint
Yep.
Ephrem says it's a mystery to me how she wasn't burned, and
Yep.
so this place where he lived for the 9 months, it can't decay there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
What an incredible points you make there, brother. And I think that I have been incredibly blessed by having you here with me today.
Thank you.
Now the brother Elijah would have joined us, but he's with family today. It's perfectly fine. We'll tease him and make fun of him because he wasn't able to join us later. But
Time. Yeah.
he'll join us next time. We love Elijah. Elijah's an incredible brain as well. The guy's amazing, and I hope he gets time to be more active again soon because he's amazing. Subdeacon, I'd like to give you time before we wrap up. Talk about your channel, anything you might be doing. What have you been up to? Anything in your mind?
William. So I had put out maybe 4 episodes, but then I had to stop because I'm doing all the wedding preparations. It's coming soon, I think in a month. Thank you. And so we've been very busy with that stuff, and still I have my thesis left for theology.
Amen.
Yeah, I did my first submission was like a month or so ago. I still have to finish. And yeah, once I kind of get the ball rolling and having like a routine, consistent life, I'll get back to putting out the episodes.
And your channel, for people to be aware of it, what is the name of your channel?
It's just my name right now, Daniel Kakish. You'll find it.
Awesome. Yeah. And in fact, I have just found it, you have 97 subs, people that are looking and watching. Let's put him over the 100 mark right now. I just sent it right there. His channel right there. Let's get him over the 100. Let's get it growing and growing and growing more. Brother.
Thank you, William.
I've been blessed by your presence. I always am, my dear friend. And I look forward to definitely talking with you again, doing multiple more shows together. As long as the Lord allows us, affords his life, brother. I had a great time with you. And I would like to ask you if you'd be willing to give us a closing prayer. I'd be very blessed by that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, William.
Definitely.
In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Lord, thank you for using us today in service of your mother to explain the truth to all of those, whether who know or who don't know. Have mercy on us because we are unworthy to speak these things. Thank you again, and open the eyes and the hearts of those listening to accept your truth. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Brother, thank you so much for your time. I see some people already saying they subscribe to your channel. And we will definitely be together again soon. God bless you, brother. Have a wonderful feast of our Blessed Mother's Assumption.
I mean, thank you, William. Thank you again. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you for being on.